Outstanding. Okay, so I'm going to get started. Just do a quick introduction of myself and then to our two panelists here, and then we'll get this conversation underway. So this is our Thrive Time service that we're bringing to everyone. Specifically, we want to create opportunities where people can identify how mental health can not only support them in their work, but in their daily lives too. So this is going to be a raw and real conversation between people who have experience with developing, positive mental health spaces. So I'll start real quick with myself. My name is Dr. Dave Hester. I am the director of guides along with my colleague Dan Klein, and I support the guides with developing the quality of service as well as making sure that our guides are prepared for member sessions. My background is in mental health counseling, meditation research, and coaching, as well as curating new technology for the improvement of well-being. And I'm so excited for these two to present to you today. We've been really kind of almost dancing in our seats, just excited about discussing this topic on how we can all improve our mental health and how it doesn't just affect us, it affects everyone else too. So I want to start first by introducing Joseph Flesch. So he is one of my favorite guides to connect with one-on-one. I just wanted to add that before I go into his bio. But for Joseph, as a young professional, he noticed that there was a challenge that he discovered within his mental health space, and it manifested in anxiety. And this was limiting, to his quality of life, his relationships, as well as opportunities to thrive. And so through exploration and professional help, his journey continued over the next 20 plus years, leading him to not only manage his anxiety and mental health, but also to live a fulfilling and joyful life of purpose. And so today, Joseph is a Reiki master. He's a teacher. He's also a certified mindfulness trainer, mentor, coach, professional executive advisor, as well as a life guide. And his aim is to support others through his journey. So welcome, everyone. I wanted you to make sure that you send a quick round of applause in the chat for Joseph. Now I want to move on to Peyton. Peyton is a reflexive empath. I love this phrasing, whose mission is to highlight the humanness in mental health and dispel the stigma surrounding it. And outside of furthering her education in psychology, Peyton enjoys being a fellow life guide, as well as her purposeful work with the Yellow Tulip Project, which is a youth-driven nonprofit organization spreading suicide awareness, prevention, and hope. Absolutely love that. So welcome to you both. We'll go ahead and let's give it. Or this is how we do in the sensory world. This is how we for my sensory people out there, it's how we clap. So I'm going to pass it right over to you, Joseph, so that we can kick this off right, get everyone in the right headspace.
Great. Thanks so much, Dr. Dave, and welcome everyone. I am super blessed and super grateful to be here on this Thrive Time event with you all. One of the things that I find most important to mental health, self-awareness, and the lessons that I've learned for myself and shared with individual and corporate clients is developing self-compassion. Having compassion towards oneself and our mental health journey, I find leads to much better outcomes and invites compassion for others on similar journeys. So what I'd like to do, I thought we'd begin today's Thrive Time with a simple and short self-compassion breathing exercise and something you can use going forward. And we can work with you all about sharing something similar in addition to the recording. So arriving here and now, settle yourself into a posture of some comfort, allowing your eyes to close gently if that feels right for you. Or if you just want to have a soft gaze that focuses on nothing in particular, whatever is comfortable for you, bringing your awareness to the here and now. Taking a big breath through your nose as you inhale. Notice your chest rising like the sun. Slowly exhaling through your nose, noticing your chest go down like the sunset. Repeating this until you feel calm, keeping your attention focused on your breathing. If you find your mind wandering, it's okay. Simply bring your attention back to your breath. Continuing to breathe, noticing any anxious or uncomfortable or agitated feelings in some way that you may want to be different, noticing that as well. If relaxation is here, noticing what that too feels like in the body. Continue breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. Noticing again your body breathing in, accepting that your inward breath is nourishing. And for you, as self-compassion and connection and the beauty and joy of the universe around you become part of you with each inward breath. Breathing in, self-compassion, breathing out. As you continue to accept the nourishment and self-compassion of your inward breath, for each exhalation, remind yourself of the presence of yourself with nature, with Mother Earth, and other beings around you, near and far. All who are seeking the same nourishment, remembering we are all part of the collective breath and heartbeat of the universe. Continuing to notice your exhale, giving thanks and gratitude that your inward breath has nourished you and is now breathing the same compassion and nourishment to others. Breathing in, self-compassion, out, the nourishment to others. Breathing in, breathing out. So bringing awareness back to the present moment and the gratitude that today's Thrive Time brings to each and all of us. I'd like to share some words of possibility that have given me meaning in seeking self-compassion and working with others to do the same. It's by Marianne Williamson and it's called Light Your Light Shine. I'm sure this will resonate with everyone. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful, beyond even our own measure. It is our light and not our darkness that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, famous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking to what other people won't feel, and so that other people won't feel insecure around. We were not born to manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it is in every one of us. And as we let our light shine, we consciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. So bring yourself back to the present moment. Slowly open your eyes. Hopefully that provided everyone some meaning, and looking forward to get started.
Thank you, Joe. That definitely brought me to the present moment. And I think I want to take a minute before I dive in here to why that was so great for us and say thank you to everybody for showing up today. Thank you, Dave, for moderating. And thank you, Joe, for that beautiful breathing exercise. So now to dive in. The reason that these breathing exercises work so well is because we are afferent beings. We get messages from our body that signal to our brain that we are safe and that we don't need all of the cortisol and adrenaline to get us through those anxious moments. So the 10th cranial nerve, the vagus nerve, actually is 80% afferent. So it is listening to our bodies and telling us what we need to release for hormones in order to function. So, 80% of those nerve endings are found in your ear, in your eyes, in your muscles of mastication, so your mouth muscles, your lungs, your heart, your digestive tract, your stomach. It is all over our body listening to us. So when we give it breathing exercises, motion, it's signaling to us that we're safe and that we don't need adrenaline, cortisol, all of these other hormones that are ramping up our fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. Um, and I could go on probably for the full hour talk about the polyvagal theory and how the nervous system really is regulating and dysregulating us throughout the day. I would love to hear Joe talk a little bit more about breathing exercises.
Yeah, I think the biggest, the premise being breathing exercises brings some self-awareness and, that temporal information and nervous system reaction is that a lot of folks, and again, having been part of having anxiety in the past largely, is simply that, you need to get to a space of not only self-compassion, but, simply not being overly critical, but also not overly analytical. Breathing is a natural thing. The fact that we went through a structured breathing approach really lends itself to how you can, make that part of your daily living. So as Peyton said, the whole point is breathing, and that, thoughts equal, manifestations in the physical realm. If you can work to control one, control the other, it helps to control the other. And, it takes practice, and it takes admission and some commitment to get started mostly.
Yeah. And those of us who suffer with anxiety, we're often perceiving fear when there actually isn't fear present. So to be able to hijack your nervous system and to tell your brain, like, hold on, I am safe in this moment, I think is so valuable. And a little pocket coping mechanism that you can take with you anywhere you go because you have your body and your breathing with you anywhere that you go.
The one thing I learned, Peyton, is that fear is an acronym: false evidence appearing real. There's no, I mean, it's pretty common, but I would like to state that because I think that really is something folks can take away in their daily life and say, fear, false evidence appearing real. Because that's, as you said, really what this is all about.
Yeah, that's also another really good thought exercise that I encourage a lot of people to try is instead of laying into that fear and creating more narratives around like what that anxiety is telling you, to challenge it with opposite stories. Um, I think the most recent one, I was talking to somebody about their intimate partner relationship, and they were detailing how they assumed that they knew everything that their partner was thinking and going to say and what they meant by their cryptic language. And I was like, well, why don't you get curious instead and challenge that assumption in your brain to say, maybe they're thinking about an elephant doing a handstand. Like you have to really start thinking out of the box and challenging those thoughts so that you can give yourself space to get back into that prefrontal cortex and really think things through rather than that emotional reactivity of the reptilian brain.
Sort of the runaway thoughts, which even in teaching meditation, mindfulness meditation in particular, is you're thinking about, am I doing it right? And then the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And kind of just slowing it down, right? And processing the way you describe.
Yeah. I mean, so I think of the brain in like three separate parts. And one of them that makes us human is metacognition, the ability to think about what we're thinking about. And then if you regress back, that's the mammalian brain. That means that we're social beings, that we require other people in order to self regulate. And then even below that one is the reptilian brain that I just referenced, where it's very emotionally reactive. It's that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. And depending on where you are on the polyvagal ladder is where you're going to fall in that the hierarchy of thinking. So when you're in a meditative state, you're in a metacognitive state. So you have access to your brain in its full capacity. But when you're in an anxious state, you're in that reptilian brain where you can only think about, well, how am I going to get out of this situation? And it's that monkey mind. But as we started this, you can hijack the nervous system with breathing exercises, with mobilizing your body to help distribute that blood, to help just tell those hormones to stop secreting and get into at least the mammalian brain and then into the metacognitive brain.
And, Dr. Dave, if you have anything to add in terms of mindfulness and if you would, the scientific research, it's literally just exploded in a really short amount of time. Peyton, obviously, speaking to the connection between all that and what's going on in your body. Most of my mindfulness certification, I would say probably 60% of it was understanding exactly what Peyton has described. And I didn't meet Peyton until we became LifeGuides together, guides together. So, while that might not be the go-to, the techniques and the background behind it, I think makes everybody feel that they're in their comfort zone, which, in various ways we're all seeking, right? It's to know it's based on factually based. Right?
It is. And the research has exploded recently, and for good reason. There's different types of meditation, for example, open monitoring, kind of just being open to what comes in, or FA, which is focused attention, similar to, chanting, for Buddhists that may be Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. For others, it may be focusing specifically on an item. What I think is really interesting about this influx of new research in meditation is that we're continuing to unfold how the brain not only heals itself, but how it interacts with different regions. Before we thought that people were completely left brain or right brained, but we're learning through research that really, each brain is almost its own person, kind of running the ship. And those little fibers, that the band of fibers, the corpus callosum that connects it between, is this super highway that basically shoots messages to the other side to say, hey, being a little too analytical, I need you to dial it back. And Peyton, you were talking about kind of the pictures in people's mind, or how a partner may be thinking. I am really interested in how much we think we know what's in someone else's head when really we have no idea because of the complexity of how they grew up or their experiences, academically speaking. All of that really speaks to how our pictures are intimate to us. So here's the quick question to both of you. How have you used, those kind of slower techniques of asking questions and being more curious to also support your mindfulness practice?
Well, I can speak a little bit with my personal journey, where I grew up in a very unpredictable and toxic, I guess is what the blanket term I'm going to use here, environment. My knee-jerk reaction was hypervigilance. So I was always trying to predict the unpredictable and be 10 steps ahead. And it wasn't until I established like this physiological safety when I left for college and had my own space that I was able to figure out if that hypervigilance was really serving me anymore, in which I found obviously it wasn't. And in order to slow down my mind, that's how I found mindful practices. And I played around with a lot and found that breathing was always the thing that I had with me. In dealing with situations growing up where a lot was taken away from me, I had a hard time. I always knew that I had my mind with me and I had my body with me, and I didn't need anything else. So the breathing exercises really resonated and have what stuck with me so far.
Wow.
What about you, Joe?
It's interesting. As a child, I remember one thing which was similar to what you just said, which is I got me. I'm pretty smart. I can go wherever, be wherever. But again, that was a 9-year-old speaking. Similarly, at the same time, as time went on and I became a professional, I think the anxiety as it manifested for me turned into an opportunity to learn Reiki and learn breathing and learn the mind-body relationship, if you will. And I remember coming to a point in the journey of professional health and self-exploration. My mom said to me, "Gee whiz, Joe, you know, you spent how many years becoming anxious? It's going to take some effort to become unanxious." And for the clinicians, Dr. Dave and Peyton, and
Oh no, that's a perfect
really-
term. I like that. Unanxious.
yeah, it's
We're
I
running
mean,
with it.
it just kind of hit home. And from there, it's interesting because my journey in the, if you would, the non-business professional world was really a balance for me as opposed to anything else. So if I had to, say to the group that is joining us today is, find your balance, right? I sometimes call it the self-awareness multivitamin. For me, it's, a formulation, right? It's, breathing, mindfulness, meditation. For me, it was holistic energy work. Folks, including my daughter who I've worked with, journaling does it for her. And then, more sort of medical trajectory and nutritional and hormonal optimization, which is where you'd have your medical professional. So, all that said, I think the multivitamin, the kind of getting out of where you think you are, understanding that, as the group said, what you think about, a spouse or partner or what have you, you really don't know because you've never walked in their shoes, and similarly, they've never walked in yours. So do what works for you.
I really like that. How long did you spend getting anxious? That is, I'm going to use that. Definitely.
Yeah.
Because it does. It takes time and discipline to establish this practice, as it does with anything. But it is one that will continue to serve you in your highest self for the rest of your life. So it's definitely one you want to incorporate and take very seriously.
And I'm sure I can speak for you in terms of hypervigilance. For me, anxiety, it's not like I woke up one day and said, wow, I think I'd be a lot better if I was really anxious. It accumulates and it happens. And, slowing down and acknowledging and being self-compassionate is a great start.
Mm-hmm. I think, that hypervigilance is a natural reaction, and the anxiety is even a natural response to what your this term called neuroception, your body's perception of what's happening. Have you ever felt like you can feel when somebody's behind you, or if you feel like eyes are staring at you? That's your body's perceptive ability to understand that there's others there, which is like two-sided, because if you are anxious prone because of experiences that you've lived through, that can feel like danger impending. But that can also, on the flip side, be what regulates you back to a vagal tone, which allows you to read the micro expressions in somebody's face to be like, oh, okay, hold on, we're safe. Their mouth is smiling, their eyes are wide, or I think you can probably think back to a time when you looked at somebody and they were deadpan and you were trying to read them, and that brought up your own anxiety. And it's that mirroring that you experience.
What was that term, Peyton, again?
Neuroception.
Yeah. And then the next one was vagal.
Oh, vagal tone.
Yeah.
Vagal tone. That just means that you're in, your nervous system is regulated.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So it's a quote unquote normal circumstance.
Right. Yeah. Your breathing, your heart rate, it's normal. Hormone wise, normal. You're not in a state of hypervigilance or freeze. So they would call that parasympathetic dominance if you're in a freeze or a fawn state.
Love that you're mixing, these terms. And I encourage everyone who's hearing, if you have a pen, definitely write these down, especially concerning the vagal nerve. That's, I believe, the next kind of bastion of the neurosciences, is understanding how we can elevate and utilize the tools that we have within. And it kind of made me think of another question, to both of you. When we think about compassion to ourselves, how do you how do you how can you be compassionate to someone who can also talk ridiculous about you? I'm talking about the self. Sometimes our self can be ridiculous to us. So how do you find compassion in those moments?
Well, I'll start because I know
Oh, Joe, I think you accidentally muted yourself.
I accidentally did, and I purposely unmuted myself. Could you just repeat the question, Dr. Dave? Because I was kind
Absolutely.
of around the keyboard.
So I'm asking about compassion, self-compassion, specifically for when we have that internal voice. You talked about anxiety. So how do you bring compassion in those moments where the self may be unkind to you?
Gotcha. Thank you. So as an individual, and certainly what I try to, bring to any sessions I have with members at LifeGuides is, it takes practice. You simply have to acknowledge that you want to, be compassionate collectively. And then think of it as layers of an onion, and you kind of work backwards and say, well, how can I be compassionate to others if I'm not even compassionate with ourselves? And kind of circling back to the, mirror terminology that Peyton brought up. If I say that once to my family, I say it 100 times a month, is that, wow, that was a great mirror for us.
Mm-hmm.
So, the kind of the interaction. So think of it, taking that forward. If you can be compassionate and have that as the mirror to others, some people won't change, and we don't necessarily want them to change, but it gets you to the point of simply acknowledging what is, which is also, a key thing that I would focus on. Is some things are just what they are, especially when it's other people in relationships or what have you. So anything to add, Peyton?
Yeah. So when I think about self-compassion, I think about my inner child healing, and I feel like that's what leads me in my internal dialogue. So when I started on my healing journey, it was healing from the trauma that I uh, endured while I was a child. So a lot of that was going back into my mind, trying to reparent that hurt part of me. In doing that, I picked up on a dialogue that was very nurturing and maternal. And I feel like that's what sticks with me now. So when I do have those anxious feelings or that self critic inside my mind, I remember to meet them with that loving mother that needed to be acknowledged like, yeah, this is hard right now. Yeah, I have a lot of stressors right now that are help fueling this self critique. And I think sometimes it's more difficult to parent myself in those moments, um but also giving myself grace, and I'm human and I'm still trying, and that counts too.
Yeah. And, as a parent, and obviously the child of a parent, one of the things that I've kind of shared with the family and friends in difficult situations that Peyton is alluding to, as well as to several members that I've had sessions with. It's, we're all human, as Peyton said. I think that, we're just trying to do the best we can with what we have at a given moment. And that pretty much in the life experience, anything can fit into those buckets. So that's what I would add to that self-compassion and what Peyton described.
I love that you're both speaking to the importance of self-compassion being a practice. It's not something that you just do one time and I'm a self-compassionate person. I did one thing. It's a continuous practice. And I want to also highlight that, for the people who are here in Thrive, I think for this Thrive Time event, and also, watching later on, it's important that we highlight how we, as most people, are in the survival mode. I think, Peyton, you were kind of speaking a little bit to that earlier about how we're just trying to keep things going or keep making it and keeping and keep surviving. Whereas we're trying to maneuver our mind and our thought process so we can slip into that thriving mode where things come easy, where you are basically unfolding your experience. Have you had any, horrible experiences in thrive mode that you maybe want to share?
What this brings up for me is the elephant in the room, which is shame. And I think um, shame is gasoline to an anxiety and depression fire. It is the really nasty inner critic that we all have. And the best way is to reframe, is to give it a new narrative. So really the minute difference between shame and healthy guilt is taking yourself out of the equation. So instead of saying, I am bad because of this behavior that I exhibited, it is, that was bad. I'm going to try better next time. So it's literally just, instead of saying I am bad, it is, that behavior was bad. Um, so separating yourself from the behavior and recognizing that you are not just a culmination of the things that you do, but all the things that you're going to do too.
Yeah, as an executive coach and group leader, as well as myself, and I know Peyton has additional information. As you go through that, you deal with imposter syndrome as an individual very often, right? Wow, am I really this good? Or, and it even goes back to what Marianne Williamson says, our light is the scary thing, right? But we always go through that cycle of growth and then the imposter syndrome. And it's becoming more of a conversation that I've been having because a lot of the folks that I work with as members of LifeGuides are really trying to achieve maybe the next level of their career or relationship or whatever. And imposter syndrome is, in my context, as I reference, is a business context. It happens. Some of the folks on the call might be leaders that deal with that. It's very normal, and it's also something you can learn to manage and even turn into an opportunity. So, the conversation is really where the magic starts to happen.
Yeah, and imposter syndrome isn't just exclusive to people in the corporate world. I think it's pretty omnipresent among everybody. If you're a new mom, if you're a new aunt, whatever your role may be, there's always that inside worry that, like, am I doing this right? Am I showing up the right way? Or what have you. But I think the power in imposter syndrome is recognizing that you can hold that paradox within you, where you are this super strong leader who also experiences anxiety. And I think highlighting that actually makes you more relatable and a stronger leader to admit to your employees, to your family, that, hey, I'm feeling this way. And it doesn't actually make me less of a leader. It makes me more relatable as a leader. Brené Brown, actually, one of my greatest inspirations, Brené Brown is a shame researcher and a professor at University of Houston. She's also like a #1 best-selling New York author. So she just really talks about leadership a lot, and how the humanness of being a leader. You don't have to be this statue of somebody who does everything perfect all the time, because nobody can relate to you in that way.
Glad you added that. I think that's an important piece about shame. That when you talk about the leaders, there's shame at times to asking for help or to even seeking a coach. But we're moving into a time now where it's more accepted. It's almost looked as a plus if you're so introspective that hey, there's something that I need to work on, and I'm connecting with someone to help me with that. I heard you mention a little bit about that too, Joseph, just as your experience as a guide, just helping members work through those challenges, not just professionally, but personally too. I wonder how much shame is brought on by, what we feel, and how much shame is brought on by external factors, whether it be societal or just what we think a person is supposed to do.
Yeah, I would comment on that and say the world we are in exposes us, and it's interconnected, to shame from the outside. I think if you can just admit that that's what's going on and then focus on what you do have control over, which is yourself, right? And, kind of in what I described as it relates to shame is, from a leadership standpoint, exactly that. You want leaders, whether it's public, quote unquote, whether it's in the workforce, to come to that conclusion. But it starts with that combination of self-awareness and self-compassion, because, they're humans just like everybody else. And there's many circumstances, if you're users of LinkedIn, where, different people post about what it means to have employees if they're the CEO of a company, and being that self-aware and self-compassionate and thereby compassionate to employees, I think is what Dr. Dave is referencing as the great mind shift going forward. And it is more accepted.
I really think that's what this pandemic kind of gifted us, was one, the awareness of mental health, but two, the importance of interoception and being able to be self-aware, and showing up that way is very vulnerable, but it's also very empowering because it gives permission to everybody else in your sphere to show up in that same manner.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One thing, and I'll just speak real quickly about my journey, as a mental health practitioner, and as well as, supporting my own mental health challenges. I found it to be really helpful when I find community, people who value, my well-being, but then also people who are just open enough to talk. And I've heard a continuous thing through all of our conversation today, which is human. And what does it mean to be human? And I have mine, and I'd like to maybe hear your kind of thought on what it means to be human in a time where humanity is kind of being stamped out. We're expected at times to be robots, to be very, no, show no emotion, just continue on. My definition of human is complexity. Like, it's infinite nuances. That's kind of what I think when we say we're human, or we're just being human. That's what I think of.
That's a really good definition. It's funny that you say that you think that we're moving towards a place where we have to be robots, because I would almost counter and say, I think that because of the pandemic, we're kind of throwing that mentality out and recognizing that mental health is an intricate part of who we are, and we can't just check that at the door when we clock in. And I also think that it's multifaceted in the fact that it's inextricably connected to the rest of the facets of health. You can't be physically and nutritionally healthful if you're not mentally healthful. The whole thing is connected to one another. And I think, again, in this era of COVID, we're seeing it become more and more prevalent and at the forefront, in the front burner.
Yeah, I agree with what the pandemic silver lining has been. And I would agree with all of that, and the complexity as well. Complexity as humans, to be human is definitely inherently complex. And, if you dig a little further or do some research, the idea of simple perception, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are we really perceiving what's going on in the outside world, the truth, if you would, or is it just our definition of it? And it's a little Buddhist, it's a little everything. At the end of the day, something a mentor taught me years ago from a business standpoint, but I think it also applies here, is he used to say, stop thinking so much about everything else but you. You should not really care what other people think of you. And that's a hard practice to get up to speed on. But he would say, your mind, as he was talking to me, your mind is a terrible neighborhood to go to by yourself. So, if you think about that, and community, and human connectedness and complexity. You know, there's nothing greater, and we have this at LifeGuides, is being in a group that is of similar thinking, to know that, you know, we're all imperfect, and, you know, just the dialogue simply, you know, manifests in so many realizations and lessons that that's kind of what we attempt to facilitate, Dr. D.
I love that. I love that. And I'll add what someone told to me. So I didn't make this up. I want to give them credit. Forgive me if I don't remember your name at the top of my head, but was that we're not only like-minded, but we're like-hearted. Meaning, you know, that we have a synchronization that comes up when you're talking to someone. I don't know if the people in this audience are familiar with like heart math. They're, you know, really deep into the research of heart synchronization, you know, being around other people and the vibrations of your heart matching. So I just wanted to add that part, that we're not only like-minded, but like-hearted too.
That, I mean, I think the value of community is exactly what we're doing here at LifeGuides. We're eradicating the shame that sometimes can accompany a really difficult situation that maybe you think that you're alone in. And when you're connected with a life guide who has gone through something similar, you have that like whole body exhale where it's like, oh my gosh, I thought I was the only one experiencing this. I thought I was the only one feeling this way. Thank God I wasn't. And that eradicates the shame. And it also is that co-regulation that I kind of kicked off this Thrive Talk with, is the ability to regulate your nervous system by looking and talking to somebody else and reading the micro expressions within their face, and to your heart math, you know, vibrating at a similar frequency.
Outstanding. Well, we have a few minutes, you know, before I want to open up to questions. I know, Joseph, you had a special surprise that I'm super looking forward to, and I wanted for us to wait towards the end to do that. Is that okay?
I have a surprise.
Wait, are you talking about the poem that you already read?
I already read the poem, Dr. D.
There's a different surprise. This surprise is, I get it. We both are
This
like,
is real time. This is real time, folks. This is how we operate at LifeGuide.
Real time surprise. This is real time surprise. At the end of this, we want everyone, if you can, to post a gratitude into the chat. So we want to give people shout outs. So if you can post someone or something that you're grateful for, we want to produce that for you and put it on wax. Well, on tape. Well, all right, sorry. Digital format. I'm going through different formats in my head. But we wanted to give everyone an opportunity to do that. But before we start to wrap and ask for questions as well as those shout outs, I just wanted to see, was there anything else that you two wanted to make sure that our attendees noticed today?
The only thing I had.
No, I was clearing my throat. It's okay. Sorry.
The only thing I wanted to add that I kind of had queued up for this conversation was dispelling the stigma around mental health, which is another thing that LifeGuides is doing. It's giving us the space to talk about difficult things and recognizing that they're normal. Nina Vasan, she is a professor at Stanford. She did a meta-analysis that revealed the average American takes 11 years to finally seek out mental health help after the onset of mental illness symptoms. So I'm hoping that, you know, we're on a new wave here and we don't have to take 11 years to get the help that we need, because Lord knows if you get a scratch on your knee or if you break your leg, you're going to the emergency room right off. You are not waiting 11 years to take care of that. And I don't think that we should wait 11 years or even 2 days to take care of our mental health either.
Yeah, I would like to just make a final point that sort of ties a lot of this together, which is the term, don't drink from an empty cup. Okay, because, you know, our world and our challenges and our relationships and everyday life expects a lot out of us. And a lot of what we talked about today, and again, a lot of the sessions over the years that I've had with clients professionally, individually, and especially at LifeGuides, is the conversation that teaches you ways to not drink from an empty cup. how to fill it, how to be compassionate to others while being compassionate to yourself. So I would just add that that little bit of analogy to something to think about on a daily basis, like how full is my cup? Recent experiences with my family, I help teach them to say, you know what, my cup's pretty empty right now. How is yours? Whether it's a coworker, a family, a friend, because at the end of the day, it's about that, connection and the humans.
I really like that
Nice.
language switch too, because I think when you make the analogy of something that's like, I'm really struggling right now, but rather like my cup is empty, it's easier to kind of bridge that conversation, especially if it's like a taboo.
Oh, no question. If it's a taboo, it's sometimes a little bit more difficult to broach, to kind of get into that topic structure or into what's going on. I'll leave everyone with one last thing before we jump into any questions and of course our shout outs here. Be kind to yourself and others. Um, and I know that's a real cliche, but one way you can be kind to yourself and others is by just accepting what is and kind of starting from there. So if someone's showing you, uh, you know, something that you're just like, okay, this is ridiculous. I don't want to hear what's going on. Just allow yourself to accept this is what is. Because sometimes I believe that our expectations lead us to become frustrated. We expect someone to do something for us. We expect someone to hold the door. When we're trying to rush for the elevator and they don't, we want to start to paint them as a horrible person. I won't say what we call them when in the mean streets of New York and New Jersey, but yeah, you get the point. All right. Well, as we wrap up here, are there any questions from any of the attendees that you'd like to ask any of the panelists? And I do see a shout out here that I'll definitely read in just a moment. Oh, wow. Okay. So we do have a question coming in. So the question is, how do you recommend those who deal with family and loved ones who are not in a place to understand your needs and invalidate your mental health needs? This is a really good question.
My answer to that would be you know yourself best. And to listen to yourself and what you need in those moments. Um, I think that can be really difficult. And the practice that I would employ is boundaries and reaffirming to them that it's okay if you don't understand, but I know that I need this for me. And I'm going to take the time and expend the energy to do this for me.
That's hard to add to that because I feel like the last several years of my life has been that for a variety of reasons. I think, another person's opinion or their ability or inability, to acknowledge certain things doesn't mean you're less of a person or you're in less of a situation where you need your needs met. So, back to the vibrational aspect of energy, the more you can kind of sit in self-acceptance, that aura resonates when you're around other people. It may not be this light bulb moment for them. However, that energy will impact them in a way that they can explore themselves. They may never say, what you said to me 5 years ago has really resonated with me. Is that really the point? The point isn't really your own acknowledgement, but we do that as humans. The point is that they've made progress on their journey. Sometimes that just starts with sitting in your own luck and sitting in your own joy, and letting the rest happen as it would naturally happen energetically.
I want to add to that just a little personal tidbit. So leaving a very abusive, toxic upbringing, I had to set some really hard boundaries where I cut ties with my parents, and my 3 other siblings really didn't understand. And that felt really invalidating for me because we all grew up in the same experience. And I was like, why aren't you guys doing this? And I was met a lot with their invalidating statements of they didn't understand why I was doing this. And I was like, you know what? I hope one day you understand, but I know that I have to do this for me. And now I'm 27 now, so 10 years. And in the recent years, they've been able to be like, oh, I get it now. Like it took me this long, but I get it now. And I respect your journey. So it might take 10 years, but hopefully someday they'll understand, but you still have to do it for you.
Wonderful. I can't say anything else behind that. Just yes, do that and be patient.
Mhm.
So now I'm going to read a little bit of the shout outs. So first, start out with Melissa. I like this one. I'm going to read it in its entirety. So allow me for just a moment. Melissa says, I am grateful for the flexibility that my work from home job allows me, specifically for the time that I've been able to devote to parenting my kids during the 8 to 5 time frame these last couple of weeks. And as a side note, she'd also like to send a grateful shout out to the laundry repair person who fixed her washing machine today. Let's give it. Hey, you got to have it. You got to have it. You got to have it. The next one comes from Russ. Russ is thankful for Kelly and David, who introduced him to LifeGuides. And we're grateful for you too, Russ. Thanks for being here. Shout out to you. We have Marie. She's grateful for this cup of coffee and listening to the three of us. So, well, thank you. Glad to be a part of that experience for you, Marie. Catherine, thank you. And we're just seeing a lot of thank yous coming through. And the last one that we'll end with is Linda, just saying that she's grateful for this hour of taking care of herself today and listening to us. And we have some more coming in. Looks like we started a good trend. I'm all for it. Alexis states, I am grateful for our emergency fund so that we can fix a big car repair. That cannot go understated. Financial challenges can be a heavy weight as far as stress goes on individuals. So having that fund, that's wonderful. I'm happy for you and your family. And Wilma, who I shouted out at the beginning of the session, I'm grateful for learning new methods of self-acceptance. We have one more from Ian. I'm grateful for having this conversation within the framework of my workspace and workday when I often need it the most.
That's impactful.
That's impactful. Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. I've appreciated this time. This is the kickstart to our new Thrive Time structure and schedule. There's going to be more to come. So please continue to attend, continue to spread the word about our Thrive Time specials and about LifeGuides, and also continue to share the world share love in the world is what I'm trying to say. Share love in the world and be there for others, be there for yourself, be you, be that light. So thanks everyone. Let's give everyone a hand. Thank you for attending. Thank you everybody for being a part of the conversation. This has been, super interactive. Yeah. Have an awesome week. Wonderful Wednesday, everyone.